Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we are continuing our life coach training program based on our book Positive Islamic Psychology, a Transcendent Model to Achieve Peace, Happiness and Success in the 21st Century. Inshallah, you can download from our website islamic-psychology.net. This whole book, we are giving it free as ebook, so that you can then browse through and then later on take the courses online. As we do this video, you can select about 30 videos and work on a specific topic and then do one practical exercise in your community or in your mosque or in your school or wherever that you are, and then he will certify you as a life coach, inshallah. So what we are talking about is that we have a lot of challenges in the 21st century which is radically different from those challenges faced by our forefathers. And I've explained to you about the 8 challenges of atheism, anxiety, depression, suicide, pornography, teenage pregnancy, and today we talk about drugs and alcohol addiction, which is destroying millions and millions, maybe billions of young people all over the world. So we have to have an answer, because not only are the advanced countries being affected, poor countries even is severely affected. For example, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, because of the heroin production there, which you have very large number of the drug addiction among the population. Alright, and naturally in many advanced countries, like America or Europe or Australia, you have very high severe drug addiction problem. So how are we going to tackle all this? Because when they affect the Muslims and the non-Muslims together, our young people will then become addict, and when they become addict, they become non-functional human beings, sad to say, but that is a sad thing. They just only go for drugs. So drug is any chemical that you take that affects how your body and your brain work. That means drugs affects the VTA area of your brain, where the production of hormone is being passed on to your the limbic system as well as the prefrontal cortex, and this whole rush of dopamine can be artificially stimulated with drugs, and that rush itself finally brings about addiction. Addiction, there's no single group of people affected by drugs and alcohol. The more and more and more, they are becoming younger and younger and younger. So that's why you have large number of population now become not functional young people, because all they think about is when they're going to get the next shot of their drugs. Addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. That means despite adverse consequences of not be able to function, despite adverse condition of feeling low, depressed, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and so many things, they still go for it because the brain is chemically addicted to it. It's very difficult to break through, and there's many hundreds of studies that showing that basically addiction is a very severe problem, because it affects, even you have your own internal willpower, it can overwhelm the internal willpower because of the change of the structure of the brain itself. So types of drugs, you have cannabinoid, you have opiates, you have stimulant like amphetamine, cocaine, you have club drugs, right? You have ketamine, you have hallucination, hallucinogen and other compound, anabolic steroid and so on. So why do they take it? You see, a lot of it is I feel good, so they think by taking that they feel good, they feel grand, they feel happy, but it is only a temporary mask over. So people who are, for example, depressed, they may feel good for a while, but then they go into very severe depression. That's why a lot of drug-related suicide. They get the euphoria, then they crash. When they crash, boom, that's it. They may end up their life. So because drugs produce intense feelings of pleasure, this initial euphoria is followed by other effects which differs from drug to drug. Certain drugs will affect in different way. Certain drugs like hallucination will affect you in terms of your psychedelic effect, which can be frightening. A lot of people, they just shout and they go even crazy for that period of time. Second one is, apart from feeling good, they feel better. Alright, so with drugs, they feel better. For example, like amphetamine, they feel more energetic, they can enjoy life, they can party the whole night, and it seems that it's like a magic thing. But then when they are hooked, they need more and more amphetamine, and in the end their brain changes so that without amphetamine they feel so low that they cannot function. And after a while, whatever amount of drugs that they take also, the effect is only becoming lesser and lesser in terms of the euphoria because of the habitation, and because you need more and more of the input of the drugs to bring back to the same level of euphoria that you get before it. The third aspect is do better. Sometimes you want to do better, right? Like you do better in exams and so on, you have to cram the whole night, so they take drugs to mask over the effect. Number 4, and this is where the biggest problem, curiosity and social pressure. Because a lot of people, among young people, they start with smoking, then they start with marijuana, right? Then they go into heavy drugs, and then they go into many other drugs, and in the end they become total drug addict and wreck their life. So signs and symptoms, you can see that if you have a friend or a colleague, when they are on drugs, you can see the various signs in which it shows what they are actually addicted. One, continued problems despite negative consequences. So they are continuously doing their drug addiction, whether in the toilet or whether in some private place, whether if, for example, like heroin or cocaine, they do the injection or sniffing. For pills, they just take pills in certain discrete area and so on. Spending less time on activities that used to be important to them. For example, if they used to interact with their friends, going out together, playing football and so on, they lose interest in all those kind of things. Drop in attendance and performance at work, at school. So if they are used to be a brilliant student, then you can see that they become more mediocre, always drowsy and sleepy in class. Alright, at work their productivity drops very severely. You can find that these people who are on drugs, they are sometimes even not able to function in their work, and that can lead to a lot of work accidents because they are still being affected by their drug. When they go to the toilet and take their drug and then go back to the workplace, they even can harm themselves when they run the machines. Serious changes in deterioration in hygiene or physical appearance. So normally you can see drug addict, you see drug addict, they physically, they don't brush their teeth, they don't comb their hair, they don't change their clothes, so they look filthy, and it is one sign of drug addiction. Depending on drugs, in order to produce the same effect, as I mentioned earlier, withdrawal symptoms such as shakiness, trembling, sweating, nausea, and fatigue when they don't have. That means they have this, they need heroin, for example, they don't get heroin at the right time. Then the effect of addiction will cause them all these severe problems, and that's what they call cold turkey. When you withdraw the drugs completely, they will even have very severe psychological as well as physiological problems that is very, very severe. Okay, so they need that drug because the addiction has affected not only their physical body but their brain to such an extent that they cannot function without that drug. So this is an example of how actually effects of drug addiction. All right, as the person takes drugs, the normal brain is functionally very good. After 1 month after taking cocaine, the brain is affected and becomes smaller. Even after they stop, after 4 months, the brain will not recover back to the same functional capability in terms of brain function. So what is important, the message is the drugs that you take destroy your brains. Your neurons get messed up. Neurons that fire together because of the addiction become so tuned to it, and a lot of other important neurons in your life is just being pruned out, and then you don't have that will anymore to live. Okay, so we'll show you one video of how drug addiction affects your physiology. But remember, from the Islamic perspective, if we want to go into drug addiction counseling, coaching and mentoring, remember the most important thing is you don't work it out through just a, for example, secular materialistic approach. Because if you just use your willpower, so-called willpower, your brain power or your motivational power, you cannot beat the drug addiction. It has to come from the inner self at the higher level. That means the feelings and thoughts, feeling, emotion and thoughts at a higher level of your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I have mentioned this in our earlier videos. You go to our FET cycle, FET, feeling, emotion, thoughts, at a higher level. Only when you have the grace, the love, the mercy, the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can you get rid of this demon, this shaitan. This shaitan of drug addiction is so powerful that once it claws on you, you have no way out unless you go back to Allah. And as you can see throughout all the drug addiction program, 9 out of 10, those who are on drugs, go back to addiction. Only 1 in 10 can be saved. And this is a very severe statistic. So we have to watch out for our children, watch out for our friends, so that none of them get into drug addiction. And inshallah, Allah protect us from this evil and protect this ummah and this deen from this evil that is destroying humanity on a very large scale.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here at Science of Addiction. I'm Risto. Many of us know addiction to be a chronic illness that alters the structure of the brain. But what actually happens inside the brain when drugs are being administered? What changes do you often see as a result? Here in this series, we're going to further explore the nature of addiction and how it affects the structure of the brain. Before we can understand the full sway of addiction, it would make sense for us to understand the primary areas of the brain that are affected by addiction. There are 3 main areas of the brain that you often find associated with addiction. The first one being the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and the midbrain. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible for all the executive functions in the brain, such as your decision-making processes, your logic, and your own reasoning. This often makes sense of our higher function when we decide whether or not something is a good or a bad idea. The limbic system is the reward circuit of the brain. This is responsible for remembering a lot of pleasant experiences and reminding us that perhaps we could do it again. For example, if you were to eat cake for the very first time, your limbic system would undoubtedly say that cake is such a lovely experience and we should eat cake again sometime. Finally, we have the midbrain. The midbrain is responsible for all of our survival functions, whether it's our vision, our hearing, or our flight and fight responses. The midbrain is responsible for the next 15 seconds. It does not view anything past that amount of time. So, when drugs and alcohol are first administered into the system, there's a large surge of a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Now, dopamine is primarily responsible for a lot of your cognitive functions, movement, and some senses of euphoria, but not to the scale of when you're actually using drugs or alcohol. When someone uses a psychoactive substance, it unleashes an inhuman amount of dopamine, something that you can never get from any natural experience. In fact, the brain even has a hard time comprehending how much dopamine is now in the system. It releases another neurotransmitter known as glutamate. Now, glutamate is responsible for your memory functions. The more glutamate that is in the system, the more likely you are to remember this experience and in greater detail. These neurotransmitters also affect the nature of the midbrain. When you have these many neurotransmitters going on, the midbrain becomes more and more sensitive to the needs of using drugs and alcohol. And these surges of neurotransmitters also affects the nature of the midbrain. The more glutamate and dopamine that's in the system increases the sensitivity of the midbrain to drugs or alcohol, making it a higher priority in the brain's functioning. Once drugs and alcohol are introduced into this pyramid at the base, the other higher levels begin to become less and less of a priority because all the focus of the brain is beginning to become more and more centered on the addiction itself. So this would explain a lot of the physical occurrences you see in your everyday life when people are addicted, that they don't often hold their social obligations at a high enough standard. Maybe people are becoming less social when they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, or they even not show up for work. So this begs the question, if drugs and alcohol can be so dangerous to the nature of the brain that it completely rewires it into a repeated pattern of use, why not just stop? Why doesn't the prefrontal cortex actually make the executive decision that drugs and alcohol are not good and we should cease using? If only it were that simple, though. See, the issue is that we have a highly overly stimulated midbrain, and the midbrain is closer to the spinal cord, which means that all the electrical signals are going to be triggering the midbrain first before the prefrontal cortex can make an executive decision. So before anyone even has the chance to even consider whether or not picking up another bottle of alcohol or taking another shot of heroin is a good choice. The midbrain is already activated and the limbic system is already going crazy, making it imperative that the drugs and alcohol are actually a necessity of life. Even if your executive functioning does not recognize it as such, your subconscious is already screaming, wanting you to re-administer the substance. So in essence, before you even have a chance to consider the choice of addiction, most of your brain has already made up its mind as to whether or not it wants to use. So with this understanding of addiction in mind, it further enforces the need for evidence-based treatment that keeps these considerations in mind before we can actually start creating real change in treatment. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. Please leave a comment down below or hit this nice subscribe button here, or even give us a thumbs up, and we would love to hear more from you.